My family thinks I dropped out of college after the first semester. They think I'm working as a cashier at Target, barely making ends meet. My father occasionally makes comments about how he knew I couldn't handle real education. What they don't know is that I've been keeping the biggest secret of my life for 4 years. And today, at Northwestern University's graduation ceremony, when my name is called along with an announcement that will change everything, my father is about to discover just how wrong he was about his worthless daughter. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, or told you'd never amount to anything, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about proving people wrong when they least expect it. I'm Sarah Chen, and this is the story of how I secretly graduated summa cum laude from one of America's top universities, while my family believed I was a college dropout failure. It all started 4 years ago, during my senior year of high school. I had worked incredibly hard to get into Northwestern University with a partial academic scholarship. I was so proud when that acceptance letter arrived. I remember running into the kitchen, waving the letter in the air, practically bouncing with excitement. "Dad! Mom! I got in! I got into Northwestern with a partial scholarship." My mother, Linda, looked up from preparing dinner with a confused expression. "Northwestern? But sweetie, we already discussed this. The money is going to Marcus for his business degree at State." My father, Robert Chen, didn't even look up from his evening newspaper. He was a successful insurance broker, always focused on practical investments and realistic expectations. In his mind, there was a clear hierarchy in our family, and I wasn't at the top of it. "Sarah," he said in that dismissive tone I'd grown to hate, "we've been over this. Marcus has real business potential. He's going to take over the family agency someday. He finally looked at me, his expression cold and calculating. "You're just not college material. You should be grateful we're even willing to help you with community college." The partial scholarship covered about 60% of Northwestern's tuition. I needed roughly $40,000 total for the remaining 4 years. It wasn't an impossible amount for our family. Dad's insurance business was thriving, and we lived in a beautiful colonial house in Naperville, Illinois. They had the money. They just didn't think I was worth it. "But Dad, I have a 4.0 GPA. I'm class salutatorian. The scholarship is for academic excellence. Northwestern specifically recruited me for their pre-law program." Marcus, my older brother by 2 years, was sitting at the kitchen table, supposedly doing homework but mostly playing games on his phone. He looked up with that smug smile I'd learned to despise. "Come on, Sarah, be realistic. You're good at school because high school is easy. College is different. Dad's right. I've got the business mind in the family. You're more of a, I don't know, maybe teaching type? Community college makes sense for you." What hurt the most wasn't just their dismissal. It was the casual certainty with which they wrote off my potential. They weren't even angry or emotional about it. To them, it was simply obvious that I wasn't worth the investment. My mother tried to soften the blow in her typical conflict-avoidant way. "Honey, maybe you could start at community college and transfer later? Save some money, see how you do?" But I could see in her eyes that she agreed with Dad. She thought I was reaching too high, dreaming too big for someone like me. That night, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, clutching the Northwestern acceptance letter. I had worked so hard for this. Countless hours studying, volunteering at the local library, writing and rewriting essays. I had believed that my family would be proud, that they would support my dreams the way parents were supposed to. Instead, they were crushing those dreams without a second thought. The next morning at breakfast, Dad made his position crystal clear. "Sarah, I've made my decision. The college fund goes to Marcus. He's got a guaranteed acceptance to State University's business program, and frankly, that's a much better investment for our family's future. You can apply for student loans if you insist on this Northwestern fantasy, but I'm not throwing good money after bad." "What do you mean, throwing good money after bad?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me like I was being deliberately obtuse. "You're a smart girl, Sarah, but you lack practical sense. Marcus understands business, understands how the real world works. You live in books and theories. Even if you somehow managed to graduate from Northwestern, what then? You'd probably end up as some low-paid social worker or teacher. That's not a return on investment. Marcus nodded along enthusiastically. Plus, Dad, I've already got connections through the business program. Professor Henderson knows Dad from the Rotary Club. I'm basically guaranteed internships. I felt something break inside me that morning, not just my heart, but something deeper. The part of me that had always sought their approval, that had always believed family meant unconditional support. So that's it, I said quietly. You've decided I'm not worth investing in? It's not personal, Sarah, Dad replied, already turning back to his newspaper. It's just realistic. You'll understand when you're older. But I did understand. I understood that my own father saw me as a bad investment. I understood that in his eyes, I was destined to fail before I even tried. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to Northwestern University, with or without their support, and I was going to prove them wrong in the most spectacular way possible. But here's the thing. I wasn't going to tell them about it. I spent the next few weeks researching every possible way to pay for college without family help. Student loans, work-study programs, additional scholarships, grants. I discovered that with my academic record and family income level, I could qualify for more aid than I initially realized. I also learned about Northwestern's work-study program, which would allow me to work on campus while maintaining my studies. It wouldn't be easy. I'd have to work multiple jobs, maintain perfect grades to keep my academic scholarship, and basically live like a monk for 4 years. But it was possible. The hardest part was keeping this decision secret from my family while I arranged everything. I told them I was applying to community colleges and looking into practical career paths. I let them believe I had accepted their judgment about my limitations. Meanwhile, I was secretly completing Northwestern's enrollment process, arranging my dormitory, and planning my financial survival strategy. The day I was supposed to start at the local community college, I instead moved into my dorm at Northwestern. I told my parents I was starting my job at Target and would be working long hours, so they shouldn't expect to see me much. This wasn't entirely a lie. I did get a job at Target, working the early morning shift from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. before my classes started. I also worked in the university library 15 hours a week and picked up tutoring jobs whenever possible. My daily schedule was brutal. Wake up at 4:30 a.m., work at Target until 9 a.m., rush to campus for classes from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., work at the library until 7 p.m., then study until midnight. I lived on coffee, ramen noodles, and pure determination. But the hardest part wasn't the physical exhaustion. It was listening to my family's comments during our occasional dinners together. "How's your job at Target going, Sarah?" Mom would ask with that slightly pitying tone that suggested she thought this was the best I could do. "It's fine," I'd reply, pushing food around my plate. "Keeping busy." Dad would inevitably chime in with some observation about my realistic career path. "I'm glad you're learning the value of hard work, Sarah. Maybe after a year or two, you'll understand why we made the decisions we did. Marcus is already getting excellent grades in his business courses." Marcus, for his part, seemed to enjoy his role as the family's academic success story. He'd elaborate on his classes, his professors, his networking opportunities, while I sat there silently, knowing I was studying subjects far more challenging than anything he was encountering. The irony was that I was academically thriving at Northwestern. Despite my exhausting schedule, I was maintaining a 3.9 GPA in the pre-law program. My professors appreciated my work ethic and dedication. I was gaining recognition for my research projects and class participation, but my family had no idea. During my first Thanksgiving break, the contrast between my secret reality and my family's perception of me became almost surreal. "Sarah looks tired," my Aunt Margaret commented during dinner. "Are you eating enough, honey?" "She's been working a lot of hours at Target," Mom explained. "It's good for her to understand what real work feels like." I wanted to scream that I was working harder than any of them could imagine, not just at retail, but as a full-time student at one of the country's top universities. Instead, I nodded and agreed that, yes, work was certainly educational. Marcus dominated the dinner conversation with stories about his college experience. His classes seemed fairly basic from what he described, but the family hung on every word like he was describing revolutionary discoveries. Professor Martinez says I have real potential in marketing, Marcus announced proudly. He thinks I could potentially get an internship with a major firm next summer. That's wonderful, Dad beamed with pride. See? This is exactly what I meant about practical education leading to real opportunities. He turned to me. Sarah, you should listen to your brother. Maybe he can give you some advice about eventually transitioning from retail to something more professional. I bit my tongue so hard, I thought I might draw blood. The most challenging part of maintaining my secret wasn't the work or the exhaustion, it was the slow erosion of my relationship with my family. Every conversation felt like a lie. Every dinner was a performance where I had to pretend to be someone I wasn't, the disappointing daughter who had accepted her limitations. I started declining family invitations when possible, claiming work conflicts. This only reinforced their narrative that I was struggling, barely making ends meet in my minimum wage job. Sarah's becoming so distant. I overheard Mom telling Dad one evening, I think she's embarrassed about her situation. It's natural, Dad replied. She's probably feeling inadequate compared to Marcus. She'll adjust eventually. Their casual dismissal of my supposed embarrassment was almost funny, considering I was actually achieving things they couldn't imagine. During my sophomore year, I made Dean's List both semesters. I was invited to join the Pre-Law Honor Society. I received a research grant to work with a professor on a project about constitutional law. These were accomplishments that would have made any parent proud, but I couldn't tell my family about any of it. Instead, I had to sit through Marcus's celebration dinner when he made Dean's List at State University. A significantly less competitive achievement that my family treated like he'd won a Nobel Prize. We're so proud of you, son, Dad said, raising his glass in a toast. This is exactly the kind of excellence I knew you were capable of. I wondered what he would say if he knew I'd made Dean's List twice at a much more prestigious university, while working 30 hours a week to pay for it myself. The financial stress was constant and overwhelming. Despite my jobs and financial aid, I was accumulating student loan debt. I lived on a bare-bones budget, often choosing between textbooks and meals. I wore the same few outfits repeatedly, shopped at thrift stores, and rarely socialized because I couldn't afford it. Meanwhile, Marcus was enjoying the full college experience that my college fund was providing. He joined a fraternity, went on spring break trips, and seemed to treat college as an extended social event with some classes mixed in. During family gatherings, he'd casually mention expenses that represented weeks of my earnings. The fraternity formal is next month. I need to rent a tux and everything. Probably cost around $300 for the whole weekend, he'd say, as if this was pocket change. I'd think about the $300 I'd just spent on required textbooks for my constitutional law course, money I'd earned by working double shifts at Target during spring break while my classmates went to Florida. The psychological toll of living this double life was enormous. I was succeeding academically beyond my wildest dreams, but I couldn't share my achievements with the people who were supposed to matter most. I was proud of my accomplishments, but that pride was tinged with loneliness and resentment. I made friends at Northwestern, but I couldn't bring them home or integrate them into my family life without revealing my secret. I dated occasionally, but relationships were complicated when I couldn't explain why I was always working or why my family thought I was a college dropout. The isolation was sometimes overwhelming. During my junior year, I received an opportunity that changed everything. Professor Williams, who supervised my constitutional law research, recommended me for a prestigious summer internship at a Chicago law firm. The internship was paid and offered real experience with high-profile cases. Sarah, this is an incredible opportunity, Professor Williams told me during his office hours. Brennan Lodge & Associates is one of the most respected firms in the city. They specifically requested our top student in constitutional law. Your research on Fourth Amendment applications in digital privacy has been exceptional. I felt a surge of pride mixed with bitter irony. Here was a professor at one of the country's top universities telling me I was their best student in my field. Meanwhile, my father continued to make comments about my realistic limitations whenever I saw him. The internship was everything I had hoped college could lead to. I worked on cases involving civil rights, corporate law, and even some pro bono work that aligned with my values. The senior partners treated me with respect and gave me real responsibilities. Mr. Brennan, one of the founding partners, called me into his office near the end of the summer. "Sarah, I want you to know that you've been one of the most impressive interns we've ever had. Your analysis is sophisticated, your work ethic is remarkable, and your understanding of constitutional principles is graduate level." He paused, looking at me seriously. "We'd like to offer you a position here after you graduate. Starting salary would be $85,000 with a clear path to associate level within 3 years. Think about it." I walked out of that office in a daze. A job offer from Brennan, Lodge & Associates represented everything I had dreamed of achieving. It was validation that I had been right to pursue my goals, despite my family's dismissal. But I still couldn't tell them about it. That evening, I went to dinner with my family to celebrate Marcus's birthday. The contrast between my secret triumph and the conversation at dinner was almost absurd. "Marcus has been chosen to be treasurer of his fraternity," Mom announced proudly. "It's a real leadership opportunity." "That's excellent," Dad beamed. "Leadership experience is crucial for business success. This will look great on his resume." I thought about the job offer sitting in my email inbox from one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms and said nothing. Marcus seemed to sense an opportunity to emphasize his superiority. "Yeah, they chose me because I'm good with money and organization. Not everyone has those kinds of practical skills." He looked at me with mock sympathy. "How are things at Target, Sarah? Still working in... what department was it?" "Electronics," I replied quietly. "Well, retail experience is valuable too," he said in a condescending tone. "It teaches you about customer service and basic work skills." Dad nodded approvingly. "Exactly, Sarah's learning important lessons about the real world. Not everyone is cut out for higher education and professional careers." I excused myself to go to the bathroom where I stood in front of the mirror fighting back tears of frustration. I wasn't sad. I was angry. Angry that these people who claimed to love me could so casually dismiss my potential. Angry that I was allowing their misconceptions to continue, but I also knew that my patience would be rewarded soon. Senior year was approaching, and with it, graduation day. During my final year at Northwestern, everything accelerated. My grades remained perfect, I was selected for the law review, and I began receiving recruitment letters from top law schools across the country. Harvard, Yale, Stanford, schools that had once seemed impossible were now competing for my attention. The job offer from Brennan, Lodge & Associates remained open, but I was also considering law school. Professor Williams was encouraging me to apply for advanced degrees, suggesting I had the potential for academic law or even judicial careers eventually. "Sarah, you have options that most students can only dream of," he told me during one of our meetings. "Your combination of academic excellence and practical experience is rare. You could literally choose any path in law." Meanwhile, Marcus was struggling in his final year. I learned through overheard conversations that his grades had slipped. He was worried about finding a job after graduation, and his fraternity treasurer position had ended badly due to some financial mismanagement. But my family continued to treat him as the success story and me as the cautionary tale. "Marcus is learning that the job market is competitive," Dad explained during a family dinner. "But he's got the education and networking to succeed. He just needs to be patient and find the right opportunity." Then he looked at me. "Sarah, you should start thinking about your long-term career goals. You can't work retail forever. Maybe Marcus can give you some advice about professional development." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Marcus, who was panicking about finding any job with his mediocre grades, was supposed to advise me about professional development, while I had multiple offers from top law firms and law schools. The final months before graduation were a whirlwind of achievement and anticipation. I was selected as valedictorian of my class, the highest academic honor Northwestern could bestow. I would be giving the commencement speech to thousands of graduates and their families. I was also awarded the Dean's Medal for Academic Excellence, given to the single student in each graduating class who demonstrated the highest combination of academic achievement, research contribution, and character. These honors came with media attention. The Chicago Tribune wanted to interview me about my research in constitutional law. Northwestern's alumni magazine planned a feature article about my journey from working-class background to academic excellence. I had to carefully manage this attention to maintain my secret from my family. I gave interviews but asked that they not be published until after graduation. I explained that I wanted to surprise my family, which wasn't entirely untrue. The law school acceptances came in during spring semester. Harvard with full scholarship, Yale with full funding plus research stipend, Stanford with a prestigious fellowship, Columbia offering a dual JD MBA program. Professor Williams was ecstatic. "Sarah, this is unprecedented. You're not just being accepted to these schools, you're being recruited by them. They want you." I chose Harvard Law School with their constitutional law concentration. It felt like the natural next step in the journey I'd begun 4 years earlier, when my father told me I wasn't college material. As graduation day approached, I faced a crucial decision about my family. I could continue hiding my achievements, attend graduation alone, and let them continue believing I was a target employee. Or I could reveal everything in the most dramatic way possible. I chose drama. I sent my family invitations to Northwestern's graduation ceremony, claiming that I wanted to attend to see what college graduation looks like, since I'd never had the opportunity myself. I suggested it might motivate me to eventually pursue education through community college. They agreed to attend, probably thinking it would be a good reality check for me to see what I'd missed by not being college material. The morning of graduation dawned bright and clear. I woke up in my dorm room for the last time, put on my cap and gown with all the honor cords and medals I'd earned, and prepared for the most satisfying moment of my entire life. My family arrived at the ceremony expecting to sit in the general audience and watch other people's children achieve what they believed I never could. They had no idea that their failure daughter was about to be recognized as the most academically successful student in her entire graduating class. I watched them find their seats from backstage, where I was waiting with other platform party members, valedictorians, deans, distinguished alumni, and special honorees. Dad looked around the impressive auditorium with what appeared to be mild interest. Mom seemed slightly uncomfortable, probably feeling out of place in such an academic environment. Marcus looked bored, checking his phone. None of them had any idea that in less than an hour, they would hear my name called as valedictorian, watch me deliver the commencement address, and learn that their worthless investment daughter had not only graduated from Northwestern, but had done so with the highest honors possible. The ceremony began with the usual processional and welcome remarks. Dean Morrison took the podium to present special awards before the general graduation. "The Dean's Medal for Academic Excellence," he announced, "is presented annually to one graduating student who demonstrates exceptional academic achievement, research excellence, and character. This year's recipient maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA while working multiple jobs to finance her education. Her research in constitutional law has already been published in 2 peer-reviewed journals, and she begins Harvard Law School in the fall with a full fellowship." I watched my family's faces as they politely applauded what they assumed was someone else's achievement. Dad was checking his watch. Marcus was still on his phone. Mom was trying to look interested but clearly didn't understand the significance of what was being described. This year's Dean's Medal recipient is Sarah Elizabeth Chen. The moment my name echoed through the auditorium will remain etched in my memory forever. Dad's head snapped up so fast I thought he might get whiplash. His mouth fell open in complete shock. Mom gasped audibly, her hand flying to cover her mouth. Marcus dropped his phone, the clattering sound audible even several rows away. I walked across the stage to accept the medal, and I could feel their eyes burning into me from the audience. The applause was thunderous, but all I could focus on was the look of absolute bewilderment on my father's face. Dean Morrison continued, "Ms. Chen's journey is particularly remarkable. Despite receiving no family financial support, she worked 30 hours per week while maintaining perfect academic performance. Her research on digital privacy rights has been cited by federal courts, and she has already been recruited by several prestigious law firms." The words "no family financial support" hit my father like a physical blow. I watched him turn pale as the implications began to sink in. But this was just the beginning. After the special awards, Dean Morrison introduced the valedictorian speaker. Our valedictorian this year is a student who exemplifies determination, excellence, and resilience. Despite facing significant personal and financial challenges, she has achieved the highest academic standing in her class while contributing groundbreaking research to her field. My father was gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. I think he was beginning to understand what was happening but couldn't quite believe it. Please welcome your valedictorian, Sarah Elizabeth Chen. The second announcement of my name sent a visible shockwave through my family. Mom started crying. Whether from pride, guilt, or shock, I couldn't tell. Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. Dad appeared to be having trouble breathing. I approached the podium to deliver my commencement address, looking out at thousands of graduates and their families, but focusing on three faces in the crowd that showed varying degrees of amazement, confusion, and dawning realization. Fellow graduates, families, and faculty, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. 4 years ago, I was told by someone I loved that I would never amount to anything, that I wasn't worth investing in, that I should accept limitations instead of pursuing dreams. I paused, making eye contact with my father across the crowded auditorium. Today, I stand before you as proof that other people's doubts about your potential are not facts about your future. They are simply reflections of their own limited vision. The audience murmured appreciatively, not knowing they were witnessing the climax of a 4-year family drama. I have worked 30 hours a week for 4 years while maintaining perfect grades, not because I had to prove anything to anyone, but because I believed in my own worth, even when others didn't. I have been accepted to Harvard Law School, offered positions at prestigious firms, and conducted research that has influenced federal court decisions. I looked directly at my father again. To anyone who has ever been told they're not good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough, those words say nothing about you and everything about the person speaking them. Your value is not determined by other people's ability to recognize it. The applause was overwhelming, but I barely heard it. I was watching my family's faces as they processed what they were learning about me. After the ceremony, as graduates and families mingled on the lawn, I finally approached my parents. The 4 years of secrecy, resentment, and hidden achievement hung in the air between us. Dad spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, I don't understand. How is this possible? You work at Target. You've been working at Target for 4 years. I do work at Target, I replied calmly. Early morning shifts before my classes here at Northwestern. I've been a full-time student here for 4 years while you thought I was a college dropout." Mom's eyes were red from crying. "But why didn't you tell us? Why would you hide this?" I looked at both of them, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction, sadness, and liberation. "Because 4 years ago you told me I wasn't worth investing in. You decided I would fail before I even tried. So I decided to succeed without you, and to let you discover my success in the most undeniable way possible." Marcus had been silent but finally spoke up. "Sarah, this is incredible. I had no idea. I'm sorry for assuming I was a failure," I asked. "For treating me like I was less capable than you? For going along with Dad's dismissal of my potential?" He nodded, looking genuinely ashamed for the first time in years. Dad was struggling to process everything. "But the cost, how did you pay for this? Northwestern is expensive." "Student loans, scholarships, and working 3 jobs," I replied. "It wasn't easy, but it was possible. Just like I tried to tell you 4 years ago." "Sarah," Mom said, reaching toward me, "we made a terrible mistake. We're so sorry. We're so proud of you." I stepped back slightly. "Are you proud of me, or are you proud of what I achieved despite you? Because there's a difference." The question hung in the air. Dad looked like he was going to be sick. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted quietly. "I was so wrong about you. So incredibly wrong." "You weren't wrong about me," I corrected him. "You were wrong about your ability to judge potential. You were wrong about what makes a good investment. You were wrong about what your role as a parent should be." The truth was, I had imagined this moment for 4 years, but the reality was more complex than I had expected. I felt vindicated, certainly. I felt satisfied that they could no longer dismiss or underestimate me. But I also felt a deep sadness about the time we had lost, the relationship that had been damaged by their lack of faith in me. What happens now? Mom asked. Now I go to Harvard Law School, I said. I've been offered a research position that will cover my expenses, so I won't need any help from you. I'll graduate in 3 years, probably with honors, and then I'll build the career I've been working toward. And us? Dad asked. What about our relationship? I considered his question carefully. That depends on whether you can genuinely understand what you did wrong, and whether you're willing to rebuild a relationship based on respect rather than assumptions. The conversation continued for another hour on that lawn, surrounded by other families celebrating their graduates. My parents asked dozens of questions about my experiences, my achievements, my plans. They seemed to be seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Marcus was perhaps the most shaken by the revelation. He had built his identity around being the successful sibling, the one with real potential. Learning that I had been achieving far more than him while he thought I was a retail worker was a massive blow to his self-concept. Sarah, he said quietly as we prepared to leave, I feel like I don't even know you. You've been living this whole other life, achieving all these incredible things, and You thought I was exactly what Dad said I was, I finished. Someone not worth investing in. He nodded miserably. How do we come back from this? I don't know if we do, I said honestly. That's something we'll all have to figure out. The weeks following graduation were strange and challenging. My secret was out, but the relationships in my family were fundamentally changed. My parents were dealing with guilt, shame, and the realization that they had completely misjudged their own daughter. Marcus was questioning everything he thought he knew about himself and his place in the family. I was accepted to Harvard Law School and moved to Cambridge for the start of classes. The distance helped everyone process what had happened, but it also meant that the work of rebuilding our relationships happened slowly, through occasional phone calls and carefully planned visits. Dad struggled the most with accepting how wrong he had been. During one of our phone conversations, he broke down completely. Sarah, I replay that conversation from 4 years ago every day. The way I dismissed your dreams, the way I called you a bad investment, I can't believe those words came out of my mouth. I can't believe I treated my own daughter that way. The words weren't the worst part, I told him. The worst part was that you meant them. You genuinely believed I was destined to fail. I was protecting myself, he admitted. I was so afraid that if I invested in your dreams and you didn't succeed, it would be my failure too. It was easier to assume you couldn't do it than to risk being disappointed. It was the first time he had been truly honest about his motivations, and it helped me understand his perspective, even if I couldn't forgive it entirely. Mom's guilt manifested differently. She became almost obsessively supportive, calling constantly to check on my law school progress, sending care packages, offering help I didn't need. It was her way of trying to make up for 4 years of dismissal, but it felt overwhelming. Mom, you don't need to send me groceries, I told her during one call. I'm managing fine. I know, sweetie, but I keep thinking about you working so hard and eating ramen noodles while we thought you were just... I can't stand that we let you struggle alone. I chose to struggle alone, I reminded her. You offered community college. I wanted Northwestern. I found a way to make it work. But we should have supported your dreams, she insisted. We should have found a way to help you pursue what you wanted. The conversations were healing, slowly, but they were also exhausting. I was trying to build a new life at law school while also processing years of family dysfunction and resentment. Harvard Law School was everything I had hoped it would be. The intellectual stimulation, the caliber of professors, the opportunities for research and practical experience, it all validated my decision to fight for my education. I specialized in constitutional law, building on the research I had started at Northwestern. My professors were impressed with my background and work ethic. I was invited to join the Harvard Law Review, participate in prestigious moot court competitions, and assist with cutting-edge legal research. But perhaps most importantly, I was finally in an environment where my achievements were visible and celebrated, where I didn't have to hide my success or downplay my ambitions. During my second year at Harvard, I received an unexpected call from Marcus. Sarah, I need to tell you something. I've been seeing a therapist, talking about our family and what happened with your graduation. I was surprised. Marcus had never been one for introspection or therapy. What prompted that? I asked. I've been struggling since your graduation, finding out about everything you accomplished while I thought you were a failure. It made me realize how toxic our family dynamics were, and how much I contributed to that toxicity. He paused, and I could hear the emotion in his voice. I was jealous of you, Sarah. Even when I thought you were working at Target, part of me was jealous that you seemed to have found peace with who you were. And when I found out what you had really accomplished, the jealousy got worse, but so did the guilt. It was the most honest conversation we had ever had. I built my whole identity around being the successful one, the one Dad believed in, he continued. But your success forced me to confront the fact that I hadn't really earned that position. I was just the default choice, because I was male and because I never challenged Dad's assumptions. Marcus, I said carefully, what are you hoping to get from this conversation? I want to rebuild our relationship, he said simply. But I want it to be real this time. Based on who we actually are, not who Dad decided we should be. It was a turning point in our relationship. Over the following months, Marcus and I had regular conversations that were more honest and substantive than anything we had shared growing up. He was working to establish his own identity, separate from Dad's expectations, and I was learning to see him as an individual, rather than just a symbol of family favoritism. My relationship with my parents evolved more slowly. Dad went through what could only be described as a personal crisis, questioning not just his treatment of me, but his entire approach to parenting and relationships. He started reading books about child development, educational psychology, and family dynamics. I realize now that I was raising you and Marcus based on my own insecurities and limitations, he told me during one of my visits home. I projected my fears onto you and my hopes onto Marcus, without seeing either of you as individuals. What are you going to do with that realization? I asked. I'm trying to become a better person, he said simply, and I'm hoping that someday, when you're ready, you'll give me a chance to be a better father. The process of forgiveness was complicated and ongoing. I couldn't simply erase 4 years of feeling dismissed and undervalued, but I also couldn't ignore the genuine effort my family was making to understand their mistakes and change their behavior. During my final year at Harvard Law School, I was recruited by several Supreme Court justices for clerkship positions, one of the highest honors a law graduate can receive. I was also offered positions at every major law firm I applied to, with starting salaries that exceeded my father's annual income. But perhaps most satisfying was the research I published during law school. My work on digital privacy rights was cited in a Supreme Court decision, making me one of the youngest legal scholars ever to influence constitutional interpretation at that level. When I called to tell my family about the Supreme Court clerkship offer, their reactions were everything I had wanted 4 years earlier, but had learned to live without. Sarah, that's incredible, Mom exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine pride and excitement. A Supreme Court clerkship? I don't even fully understand what that means, but it sounds amazing. Dad's voice was quieter, but deeply emotional. Sarah, I don't have words. You've achieved something I didn't even know was possible, and you did it all on your own. Marcus was perhaps the most articulate in his response. Sarah, do you realize what this means? You're going to be working directly with Supreme Court justices. Your research could influence laws that affect millions of people. This is extraordinary. Their pride was real and overwhelming, but it was also tinged with regret. I could hear in their voices the awareness that they had almost missed being part of this journey entirely. Which justice offered you the position? Dad asked. Justice Elena Rodriguez, I replied. She specifically requested me based on my constitutional law research. The clerkship starts right after graduation. There was a long pause before Dad spoke again. Sarah, I need you to know something. When I told you 4 years ago that you weren't worth investing in, I was the stupidest man alive. Not because of what you've achieved, but because I failed to see the person you already were. It was perhaps the most meaningful apology he had ever offered, because it focused on his failure to recognize my inherent value, rather than just celebrating my external accomplishments. The day of my Harvard Law School graduation was completely different from my Northwestern ceremony. This time, my family attended knowing exactly who I was and what I had achieved. There were no secrets, no hidden accomplishments, no shocking revelations. But in some ways, it was more meaningful because their pride was informed and genuine. As I walked across the stage to receive my Juris Doctor degree, magna cum laude, I looked out at my family in the audience and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, a sense that they truly saw me. After the ceremony, we gathered for lunch at a restaurant near Harvard Square. The conversation was easy and celebratory, focused on my future plans and their excitement about my opportunities. "Tell us about Justice Rodriguez," Mom requested. "What will you be doing in your clerkship?" "I'll be researching constitutional issues, helping draft opinions, and providing analysis on cases that come before the court," I explained. "It's essentially a year-long intensive education in the highest level of legal reasoning." "And after that?" Marcus asked. "I have options," I said, smiling. "Several law firms have made offers for when my clerkship ends. I could also pursue academia, maybe work toward becoming a law professor eventually, or even judicial positions down the road." Dad shook his head in amazement. "When I think about the conversation we had 4 years ago, I told you to consider community college or getting married. Now you're talking about potentially becoming a judge yourself someday." "The conversation 4 years ago was necessary," I said, surprising him. "If you had supported my dreams back then, I would never have learned that I could achieve them entirely on my own. I would never have developed the resilience and self-reliance that got me through the hardest parts of this journey." "Are you saying you're glad we didn't help you?" Mom asked, confused. "I'm saying that your lack of support forced me to find strength I didn't know I had. It taught me not to depend on other people's belief in me to pursue my goals. Those are valuable lessons, even if they came in a painful way." It was true. While I wouldn't wish the experience of family dismissal on anyone, it had fundamentally shaped my character in positive ways. I had learned to be self-reliant, to persist through adversity, and to find motivation from within rather than from external validation. Marcus looked thoughtful. "You know what's ironic? Dad always said I had more practical sense than you, but you're the one who figured out how to make your dreams financially viable. You turned education into a sustainable career path, while I'm still figuring out what I want to do with my business degree." It was an insightful observation. While they had dismissed my goals as impractical, I had actually been more realistic about the economic value of education and the concrete steps needed to achieve my objectives. "What are you planning to do?" I asked Marcus, genuinely curious about his post-graduation plans. "I'm actually thinking about going back to school," he admitted. "Maybe pursuing a master's degree in something I'm actually passionate about, rather than something I thought would make Dad proud." "What are you passionate about?" "Environmental science, actually. I've always been interested in sustainability and conservation, but I never thought it was a practical career path. Sound familiar?" We all laughed at the irony. Dad had steered both of us away from our genuine interests in favor of what he considered practical, but only I had been stubborn enough to ignore his advice. "Environmental science is incredibly practical right now," I told Marcus. "Climate change law is a growing field. If you're interested, there are ways to combine environmental science with policy and legal work." For the first time in years, Marcus looked genuinely excited about his future, rather than anxious about meeting expectations. The conversation continued late into the evening, covering topics we had never discussed as a family. Our individual dreams, our mistakes, our hopes for the future. It felt like we were finally getting to know each other as real people, rather than playing the roles we had been assigned years earlier. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Dad pulled me aside. "Sarah, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Do you think we can rebuild our relationship? Really rebuild it, not just pretend the past didn't happen." I considered his question carefully. "I think we're already rebuilding it," I said. "But it's going to be a different relationship than we had before. I'm not the same person I was 4 years ago, and hopefully you're not either." "I'm not," he said firmly. "These past 3 years have been the most educational of my life. I've learned more about myself, about parenting, about recognizing potential in people than I learned in the previous 50 years combined." "Then yes," I said. "I think we can build something new, something better." 6 months into my Supreme Court clerkship, I received an unexpected call from my old high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson. Sarah, I've been following your career through the alumni updates. I can't believe what you've accomplished. A Supreme Court clerkship at your age is almost unheard of. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. It's been an incredible experience. I'm calling because I want to ask you a favor. Would you consider speaking at this year's graduation? I think our students, especially those who feel like college might not be possible for them, could benefit from hearing your story. The invitation got me thinking about the message I wanted to share with young people facing similar challenges to what I had experienced. A few weeks later, I stood at the podium in my old high school auditorium, looking out at the graduating class of 2024. Many of these students were facing the same kinds of family doubts and financial obstacles that I had confronted. 4 years ago, I sat where you're sitting now, I began. I had dreams that seemed impossible, and people who loved me telling me those dreams were unrealistic. I want to talk to you today about the difference between practical and possible. I told them my story not as a tale of revenge against my family, but as an example of what becomes possible when you refuse to let other people's limitations become your own. Your worth is not determined by other people's ability to invest in you, I told them. Your potential is not limited by their capacity to envision your success. If you believe in your goals strongly enough to work for them, they are practical by definition. The response from students was overwhelming. Dozens of them approached me afterward with questions about college financing, academic planning, and handling family resistance to their dreams. One young woman, Maria, reminded me particularly of myself at that age. My parents want me to get married and start a family instead of going to college, she told me. They think education is wasted on girls. How do I convince them they're wrong? You don't, I replied. You prove them wrong through your actions. Focus your energy on achieving your goals rather than changing their minds. Their opinions will follow your results. It was advice I had learned through experience, and it felt meaningful to pass it along to someone who needed to hear it. That evening, I called my parents to tell them about the speaking engagement. How did it go? Mom asked. Really well. It felt good to turn my experience into something helpful for other people. I'm proud of you for that, Dad said. For taking what we put you through and using it to help others instead of just resenting us for it. I do resent parts of it, I said honestly. But I've also learned that resentment is only useful if it motivates positive change. Holding on to anger just for its own sake doesn't serve anyone. It was a level of emotional maturity that I had developed through years of processing my family experience, often with the help of therapy and supportive friends. Sarah, Dad said quietly, I want you to know that I tell people about you now. About what you've accomplished, yes, but also about how wrong I was about you. I use our story as an example of how parents can damage their children by projecting their own fears and limitations. Are you comfortable with that? I asked, surprised. I'm comfortable with taking responsibility for my mistakes if it helps other parents avoid making the same ones, he replied. Your success doesn't erase what I did wrong, but maybe our story can prevent other families from going through what we did. It was a mature and selfless approach that showed genuine growth on his part. As my Supreme Court clerkship progressed, I had the opportunity to work on cases that felt deeply personal. We heard arguments in a case involving educational access and economic discrimination. I found myself thinking about all the students like me who were being told their dreams were impractical due to financial constraints. The research I provided for Justice Rodriguez's opinion in that case drew heavily on my understanding of the real-world impact of educational barriers. My personal experience informed my legal analysis in ways that made my work more meaningful and effective. Your perspective on this issue is invaluable, Justice Rodriguez told me during one of our research meetings. You understand these challenges in a way that many legal scholars don't, because you've lived them. It was satisfying to realize that my struggle had not just made me stronger individually, but had also given me insights that could influence legal decisions affecting thousands of other people. Near the end of my clerkship, I had to make decisions about my next career steps. Law firms were still interested, offering salaries that would immediately place me in the top income percentiles. Academia was also appealing, with several law schools expressing interest in hiring me as a professor after a few years of practice experience. But I found myself drawn to a different path: public service. The Department of Justice had offered me a position in their Civil Rights Division, working on cases involving educational access, economic discrimination, and constitutional protections for vulnerable populations. The salary was significantly lower than what private firms were offering, but the work aligned perfectly with my values and experiences. When I told my family about my decision, their responses revealed how much our relationships had changed. "That sounds perfect for you," Marcus said immediately. "You've always been motivated by justice and fairness more than money." Mom's reaction was supportive but concerned. "Are you sure you want to give up the higher salary after working so hard financially during school?" "I'm sure," I replied. "I learned during those 4 years that I can live on very little when I have to. I'd rather do meaningful work for adequate pay than lucrative work that doesn't fulfill me." Dad's response was the most meaningful. "Sarah, 4 years ago, I criticized you for pursuing impractical dreams instead of focusing on financial security. Now I see that you've achieved both financial security and meaningful work by following your values. You were right about what made sense for your life." The acknowledgement felt like a final piece of closure on our original conflict. I started my position at the Department of Justice 6 months later, working on cases that directly addressed the kinds of systemic barriers I had encountered in my own education. My first major case involved a school district that was systematically steering low-income students away from college preparatory courses, limiting their access to higher education. The parallels to my own experience were obvious and motivating. Working with students and families affected by educational discrimination, I was reminded daily of how different my life could have been if I had accepted my family's initial assessment of my potential. I saw young people who were internalizing messages about their limitations, and I worked to ensure they had legal protections and opportunities to prove those messages wrong. 2 years into my DOJ position, I received an unexpected invitation. Northwestern University wanted to award me their Distinguished Alumni Award for public service, and they asked me to deliver the keynote address at their graduation ceremony. Standing on the same stage where I had been recognized as valedictorian 6 years earlier, I looked out at a new class of graduates and their families. The circular nature of the moment was not lost on me. 6 years ago, I stood on this stage as your valedictorian, I began. Today, I stand here as someone who has learned that your greatest achievements in life won't be the ones that prove other people wrong about you. They'll be the ones that prove yourself right about who you want to become. I told them about my journey from that graduation day to my current work, emphasizing how my career had been shaped not just by my academic achievements, but by my understanding of systemic barriers and my commitment to removing them for others. Success isn't just about reaching your own goals, I concluded. It's about using your achievements to create opportunities for people who are facing the same obstacles you once faced. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me with a familiar story. "My family doesn't think I should go to law school," she told me. "They say it's too expensive and too competitive, and I should be more realistic about my goals." I smiled, remembering my conversation with Maria at my old high school. "What do you think?" I asked her. "I think they're scared for me," she replied thoughtfully. "But I also think they're wrong about what I'm capable of." "Then you already know what you need to do," I told her. "Trust your assessment of your own potential over their assessment of your limitations." She nodded with determination. That reminded me of myself at her age. As I drove home from the ceremony, I reflected on how completely my life had changed since that first Northwestern graduation. The relationships with my family that had been broken by their lack of faith in me had been rebuilt around mutual respect and understanding. My career was fulfilling and impactful in ways I had only dreamed of as a college student. Most importantly, I had learned that other people's beliefs about your potential, even when those people are your family, are just opinions, not facts. The only opinion that ultimately matters is your own, backed up by your willingness to work for your goals. That evening, I called my parents to tell them about the keynote speech. "How did it go?" Dad asked. "Really well. I talked about turning obstacles into opportunities and using success to help other people overcome similar challenges." "That sounds like the perfect message from you," Mom said warmly. "Sarah," Dad added, "I want you to know that when I see you now, the person you've become, the work you're doing, the impact you're having, I realize that you turned out exactly like you were supposed to. Not despite what we put you through, but because of who you've always been inside. It was perhaps the greatest compliment he could have given me, because it recognized that my success had come from my own character and determination, not from external circumstances or luck. "Thank you," I said. "That means everything to me." As I hung up the phone, I realized that my story had come full circle. I had started as someone fighting to prove her worth despite family doubt. I had evolved into someone who understood that worth doesn't need to be proven to anyone except yourself.